Hello, Jamie from Inky&Scrappy back with my starter stamping series for card makers, or if you're trying it out, even just coloring in general. It's, it's a dual purpose thing. Anyways, I'm going to be using an Ink Road Stamps Inked Girl today. So this one is Kara, the Inked Girl from May of 2023. And why is there so much day left at the end of my patience? This is a great monthly subscription if you're just starting out and you like bigger images to color or to paper piece. And it's usually well, there are multiple ones that she has. So there's the Inked Girls, there's Snarky Kitty, like a like a sassy kitty that kind of does his thing. I don't have any of those yet, but trust me, they'll be showing up soon. There's a Junie one, which is I think done by a black artist, which those ones are gorgeous as well. I have a couple of those, and I'm trying to think what some of the other ones are, but they all tend to be in this kind of size range. It works pretty good with the other one, and they usually have one to 3 or 4 coordinating sentiments, I guess you could say, that kind of go with them. And so they're great for this kind of layout and card design. Now, this one looks a lot bigger than this one, right? So we're just going to size it up a little bit, and you can definitely go square. You could actually, with these, you can go with like a rectangle. And your basic is still going to be the same. You're just looking at making sure that your image is kind of up on top, and you can put your sentiment either down on the bottom. You can always flip it, put your sentiment towards the top, or flip it this way and put your sentiment on the bottom if you're going with a big rectangle sort of thing. And you have many options when it comes to this one. So when I say it, this is my base. This is just, but you can definitely do it all different ways. So keep that in mind when you're creating. Don't feel like you're stuck in the box. Think outside of it sometimes. The other thing we're going to bring in today is pattern paper. We really haven't talked about pattern paper. We kind of did our own thing last time, and pattern paper is a great, easy thing to incorporate into your cards to get more color and more different looks without having to do a lot more extra work. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. You can also do some paper piecing. So paper piecing, like your big piece here, would work really well, those types of things. So I think I'm going to use the New Day one today just because it actually has pattern paper, and then also because it's a mega pad, the mega pads have coordinating cardstock colors in there, and so I can get away with everything coming from one paper pack. So yeah, I've used this one, so it's kind of a hot mess, but it's got your solids in there as well as your patterns, and it's going to work really good to create a coordinating card color-wise, if that's something that you struggle with. The other thing I'm going to bring in today is some alcohol markers. Now, I am going to color using the Ohuhu 60 color set for the most part. This is what I use for my card class. I have the Ohuhu 60 color set and the Ohuhu 36 skin tones. These ones are the fine nib ones, so the Oahu line. They're a little bit cheaper than the brush line, and they're a great starter set. They're going to give you, if you can see here, and this isn't all of the blends, but this gives you a fairly good, representation of what you're going to get. There's not a lot of pastels in there, so if pastels are more your thing, you love pastels, they have a pastel add-on set that works. But ultimately, if you start with the 60 and you like it, it does, I think the website does have on there which sets you can add to it to get the full line. So you don't have to start with that 320 set if you don't want to. If you can afford to start with the 320 set and you've tried alcohol markers before, I would do it. But that's just because I have full set syndrome. So I'm going to actually bring in my guillotine cutter today because, well, yeah. The other one is under a pile of paperwork as I prep for my in-house card class. Jamie's a little slow on the uptake. It's all good, right? Okay. So for this one, we're going back to our
pattern again, right? And I think I'm gonna need a little bit bigger than a little bit bigger than 3 inches by 3 inches, because this one's a fairly good sized stamp. So let's dig this one out and let's just measure here. So this one, yeah, 3 inches is probably, I mean, it'll work, but it's gonna cut it fairly close and there's not gonna be much area around it. So I think I'm gonna go with a 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. So let's cut down, and I am using some Bristol Smooth cardstock here because I will be doing some alcohol coloring, and I like to color on, I really like to color on Express It cardstock, but for this class we will use some Bristol Smooth just to stay with those bare basics that we talked about in the first video. So if you missed the first video and you want to see what bare basics I say you kind of need to start stamping, those ones will be listed. The link will be below on this one. So this one looks like it's going to fit pretty good. Now let's see. Do I want to color this or do I want to stamp it and call it? Do I want to do pattern paper behind it? Let's do pattern paper behind it today and we'll go from there. I don't have a plan today. Can you tell? I'm a hot mess. It's all good. If you're gonna craft with me, this is kind of how I roll. I think that would be pretty in the background, and we can pull some of those purples and pinks and yellows into our cup maybe. We could also do some pattern paper on the cup if you so choose. It's just called paper piecing. It's a lot more cutting. Ooh. See, I'm a sucker for a good plaid, so that's a gorgeous plaid. Anyways, let's go with that one. We could do the plaid maybe on the bottom there. That's a little busy for me. Let's just go with a solid. I don't know if we're gonna find a solid. Let's go with the gingham. The solid gingham will go good. It's a little bit of pattern, but it's quieter than a lot of the other stuff. And then for our actual panel piece, let's see here. Ooh, that one would be pretty too. Don't mind me as I get distracted by pretty paper. It's in my wheelhouse. We could go with the solid color, but I'm gonna go with, I liked that blue speckle one. Let's see here. What's on the back side of this bibby? Well, that one would have worked too. Okay. Can I find it? I was hoping I had a partial piece cut and I could get some of these out of my hairs, but no dice. Okay, so I'm going to come in with this one. So this one I'm going to cut down. It has something funky on there, but it's not going to matter because I'm going to end up cutting it down anyways, or covering it up. So 4 1/4 is going to be our A2 size card base. I am using the Tim Holtz Guillotine. This one is the 8 1/2 one, and so it only, you know, your max width this way I think is 9 inches. I'm not positive. 7, 8, yeah, it's probably 9 inches. And so you can't do a 12 by 12 in this one, which is why I suggest going with that bigger one that has the 12 by 12 and the slider. I do like the slider, but for this, it's currently available to me, so I'm gonna go with it. So we did our background piece here, and I'm gonna cut down this one. I'm gonna cut out my image and put her on top, so it's not, but what size did we do this one? We did this one at 3 1/4. So let's do this at 3 1/4. 3 1/4 by, we don't need this one to be 3 1/4. So let's go with this one because it's easier to cut it this way. I'm gonna cut it this way. Let's go, do we want an inch? Let's go 1.5 inches on this one. We can always decide to trim it up. So 3 1/4 by 1.5 inches for this piece. And then this one I'm going to need 3 1/4. by 3 1/4. And I cut this one 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 just because then this piece is going to lay on top. I don't have to worry about trying to make sure that I'm the right size. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to you. So ultimately, my card base is going to look like this. And then I will probably do a flag style down on the bottom with my sentiment just to get it to pop up off of that dark paper. But we'll get there for that one. So I'm going to pull this one off, and yes, the first inking is always the best. I'm just kidding. It's usually, it takes a little bit more just because you can condition them by rubbing them with your hand, a red rubber eraser some people use, and just kind of rub them over the top. It helps them to hold ink a little bit better for their first initial inking. I am not a stamp purist. I don't care if my stamp gets stained. I think it just works better once it's been conditioned. So kind of like cast iron. Cast iron works better when it's been conditioned. So I'm going to pop that one on there, pop that one in there, and we're going to come in again with our Intense Black ink. Either Hero Arts Intense Black or Fawn's Jet Black Ink are my favorites. I know there's other brands out there that work well with alcohol marker friendly. These are the two that I have, so they're the two that I tend to gravitate towards. Mementos makes one, I'm trying to think, Mementos Black Ink. It's not, I don't think it's as dark as this one. And so I don't tend to, I have it, I just don't use it as much. They do have a brown, espresso brown, so if you don't like the stark black line, you can definitely go with their brown or their gray, and it'll give you, I must have wiggled. Alrighty, this is what happens. So it didn't work great the first time, let's try it the second time. I have noticed that with this stamp platform, it does wiggle from time to time, so try to make sure that you are going straight up and down with it and not like wiggling your platform. Does that, I hope that makes sense. That was a lot better impression. So I like to do 2 sometimes just to get a nice crisp impression, but really that one is fine. And by doing it this way, I risk having that shift again, but it turned out good this time. So, and then I just come in with a microfiber cloth and kind of clean off. It's just, mine is dry. I just kind of wipe off the ink. Flower cloth sack works as well. Fawn has a really nice stamp cleaner cloth, which also works really well. And then I'm going to pop that one back on. And I'm going to take this out even though I'm not ready for it. I'm just going to pull that one out and kind of put it there so it's on there and ready to go for when I get that far. So for this one, I want to keep this one fairly simple. Of course, I could have stamped out some pattern paper and cut and done some paper piecing. So I talked about kind of my 60 set, right? And so I've made, this one is missing, let's see, I have the piece of this one right here. So it comes with your marker, a color swatch sheet. So this is kind of, you know, where your starter is for it, I guess. But so if I'm looking at, usually when I do my color swatches, I kind of look at, okay, this purple kind of goes with this purple, and this pink could be this pink right here. The rose pink with the RV 390 would look really good with it. So I'm going to keep my coloring really simple today. I'm only going to do one marker color, and I'm going to blend out, not like, I don't know, not like my normal. So I'm going to stick with one color. So what did we say? I said I was going to do this B281, which is called Pale Blue Violet, and the RV 390. RV 390. which is rose pink. And then for my skin tones, I'm going to do pastel peach for my little girl. And what color hair do I want? I do lemon yellow. Let's see. We could do brownish. We could do brick brown, brown gray. It's 181 is probably in my other. I'm limited on my browns on that one, so let's go to this one. So I'm going to bring in those skin tone colors just because I like a little bit more variety. 191 is going to be primrose, and then my yellow is 397, which is, this one's from the 60 set, this one is from the skin tone set. So keep that in mind if you're going with just the skin tone. Y396 is going to work in those. And if you don't have alcohol markers, go in with watercolor and use watercolor, and you'll get gorgeous results. It's a nice big image, so you should be able to go in with watercolor and get some nice easy coverage with it for sure. Now, I did not heat set, and I probably didn't wait long enough for my image, especially with that heavy black line. So the only thing I will say about coloring with alcohol markers on Bristol Smooth is it takes a little bit longer to dry, I think. At least your ink does. Usually I don't have smearing issues, but of course today, because I'm doing it on live. So I'm going to come in and I just kind of lay in my shadow where I want it to be. Let me zoom this in a little bit for you. I want it to be a little bit darker in those areas, and so by doing kind of like the outline where I would think a shadow is going to be, so I think there would probably be a shadow on the underside of her legs here, and then where her legs cross, there's probably going to be a little bit darker shadow. The other thing that there's probably going to be a little bit darker underneath her glass line here, just because there's going to be a shadow. I mean, you can probably go with a shadow under here too if you're getting all technical. I am not technical when it comes, I'm not a traditionally trained colorist. I just do what I think looks good to me. And so it's a learning process, and you go from there. So I'm just going to come in now for my second layer, and this is kind of where you get some of that shading that happens. You just go over everything that you've colored plus adding in a second, the full layer on everything. And because I'm not worried about her glasses and all the things, I'm going to go with the big end and just kind of make fast work of it. I'm also not very patient, if you can tell. Yeah. So you can always come back and add a third layer in over the top of that second layer on your drop shadows. But really, ultimately, you're adding, so alcohol ink is transparent, and so you're adding in another layer on top of another layer. And so you're going to get a subtle second generation, or a second, a darker color in those areas. I hope that makes sense to you. I don't know. So I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to do 2 markers for the hair just because I like a little bit of texture. But I just kind of try to follow those where I would think the hair would be flowing this way and that way. And this one is going to be really streaky because it's my darker tone. I'm not really worried about coloring the whole thing in yet. When I come in with my lighter tone, which is that Y195, and this is a lot like coloring the mermaid's hair with watercolor. So I kind of go in, but I do a different watercolor. So you color, I usually try, I think I did it streaky last time, but if you go in with your base color really light and kind of just do the whole thing and then come back in with your watercolor and do your second layer, that'll work as well. So I'm just coming in with the lighter one, coloring it all out. It's going to help lighten up that darker tone a little bit because we're using a different toned marker. And let's see, we're going to do some pink on the little heart here. And I'm just going to color the whole tag in. You can come in after, this is the other option you have, is to color it all with your one tone and then come in after the fact, after it's dry, and add another layer on top. That will also help with some of your adding some more interest and or shading to it. So for my cup, I like to add kind of where I would think there's going to be a natural shadow because her head is laying there. And then of course on the curve of the cup here is probably going to be, to get it that round look without actually using more than one marker, we're just going to start by kind of adding in where the shadows are going to be, or I guess the outside layer. I think I'll do a pink handle just for some interest. So now that this one is dry, I can come in with a second layer. Now, when I say second layer, you have to actually color over everything that you've already colored and then go over that new area, but make sure you're only going over that new area one time. By going over that new area only one more time, you're only putting one layer of color and you're not going in with a second layer. As you can see that there's a darker layer here. And there's probably going to be a shadow by the tea bag, isn't there? Okay. And so I'm coming in with a second layer. I'm going to actually come in with a third layer on this one. And the third layer is going to darken up that first layer, and it's also going to darken up that second layer. I probably should have extended that a little bit more, but it is what it is. Okay. So now that I have two layers down, I'm going to come in and do my third layer. You can do this with the little end. Like I said, I am very impatient, so I'm going to come in and do it with the big end. It's not as easy with the big end, so if that's not, you know, if you're not as comfortable, please go ahead and use the smaller end. You will get more ink down as well with the smaller end, you know, layering wise, but and then making sure to hit those outer areas again, getting that third layer of ink down. And so you can keep layering until you get the look that you're going for. I didn't put any shadow around her legs, so I'm just going to come back in here and drop a little shadow in here. Nothing too fancy. And then I'm going to do the same technique with that handle that I did with the other. So I would say here's probably going to be a darker undertones. Probably right along here is going to be darker. And then a little bit further back. And then I try to let it dry a little bit before I come in with my next layer. And there we have our handles done. That is done. I probably want to come in with a cool gray or a warm gray 150. We're here somewhere. Warm gray 150. I'm gonna just come in with that one around because my tea bag tag here is probably white. I'm just gonna come around and kind of do that warm gray as opposed to leaving it white, because I got a little over color, and this will definitely help kind of blend and bleed that out. So alcohol markers, there's really not an eraser. Your zero blender marker is going to be an ink pusher, but it kind of works as an eraser. So if you kind of got out of the line, you can come back in and just kind of push that back in with the zero. It's really just pushing the ink actually further into the paper. And so see how it kind of comes through on the back side. So the more ink you layer on top, the further into the paper it's going to go. It's how it works. So for our actual tea here, are we going to do dark tea, light tea? We could do walnut. Brick brown would work. Walnut would work. Let's see what I have sitting in my pile here. I have burnt sienna sitting here, so let's do some burnt sienna. 340. Oh, it is up there. Don't mind me. All right, so I'm gonna lay in and this is just going to be a basic brown. And this is a fairly dark color, so I don't know if we're going to be able to see a whole lot of shadow, you know, shadow and shade kind of look to it, but we'll make it work. And yes, I'm being naughty and coloring with the fat end again. So now I'm just coming back in, after I've colored that whole inside, I'm just going to come back in and try to add in a couple of places where I think I want it a little bit darker. Keep in mind, adding layers of ink, you risk it flowing into part of the image that you already have there. So like when I was using the big end, I oopsed it, right? So I'm just going to come in with that colorless. It's called a colorless blender, but really it's, I don't know if I'd call it a blender so much as kind of like the ink pusher. So I'm just going to come back in with that peach pastel and do a layer over the top to try to push that out. So it hides my mistake pretty good, so it's not a big deal. And if you wanted to, you could definitely go in with some, like a lighter tone of pink to add some pink rosy cheeks. So I wouldn't say there's any in the 60, but you could probably do an R192 maybe. Let's see if I have that one here. So pinkish vanilla, if you want to add some little rosy cheeks to your image. So we have little rosy cheeks there. I think we're good. We're going to come in with my scissors. Oh, my other one, I found it. It's just, yeah. And this one's a fairly good sized image. There's not a lot of, I don't know. It's not too fussy. When I say, you know, it's not too fussy. It's just not like the mermaid that we did in the first one. It's not quite as small and intricate. So I'm just going to cut right along that outline. Trying to move my paper as I just push down on the scissor blade. So I'm not really moving the scissors as much as I'm moving the paper. I still have it zoomed in, but we're still on camera, I think. So I think we're all right. we hit our hour mark again, so of course it quit recording. So for this one, because I have sharp tip scissors, I'm just gonna slowly wiggle it in there. And this is kind of the reason why you have a sharp tip on your scissors that we talk about. You don't really need that sharp tip for the fussy cutting part. You need the sharp tip to kind of get into intricate places if you want to go that route. If you don't want to do the inside cuts, you don't have to do the inside cuts. Please keep that in mind. It's just an extra step and an extra option when creating. This one was a fairly big area, so I wasn't too worried about it not turning out good. Now, what do you do with that white space? You can go back in and fussy cut it some more. What if you cut off all the black space that you wanted and it just didn't work? Well, your set comes with a black, so I'm just going to go back in with my little black one here, and this is going to help finish off your image as well. Just be careful not to kind of touch the top. You just want to kind of run it along the outside. Now in this one, I'm going to have to be careful here and kind of just come in and do this one, because I can't quite run it along the outside of that part, but just coming in and just going along the outside. Keeping your pretty coloring on top, you're less likely to slip with your marker like I did on the back side. So you just kind of, this will just clean up all of those cut lines, kind of finish it off and give it a final finished look. So there is, oops, there's a little bit, I missed a little bit there. It's kind of a cheat when you're doing that cutting thing. So I'm gonna zoom back out here, whoops, in first. Zoom back out here, and then we're gonna finish our card up. That's just me. Okay, so those are the colors that I used for my coloring today. All of them except for, I think, the Primrose were in the Ohuhu 60 marker color in the Oahu or Fine tip line, if you are interested in the colors that I used. Otherwise, watercolor wise, if you have, do watercolor colors that are going to coordinate with your cardstock, kind of figuring out, like I did with mine, which ones are going to work the best. Now, this one is a little bit bigger than the last one for our square if you have a rectangle, because maybe your image is taller instead of, it's not going to fit in a square. That's fine too. Put it either towards, make sure it's kind of equidistant around at least 3 sides, okay? If it's not, if there's not a lot of room there, if you don't want to put a sentiment on it, make sure it's equidistant all the way around. That works as well. Kind of keep in mind that your A2 size card is going to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So if you need to look up, there's plenty of resources out there for A2 size card sizes, like the measuring on what mat size is going to look good on an A2 size card. So for this one, let me pop it off of there. I'm just going to line this up on the bottom here and then the side. So I'm just going to put my base on there. So this just kind of gives me maybe my tablecloth and then my wallpaper, right? So, and then we're going to put our image here. You can definitely pop this one up with foam tape if you have it available to you. If you don't, that's fine too. They mail a lot easier without the added foam, but that added foam tape just gives it a little bit something. So I'm going to pop her on. And then we're going to glue this one down onto our base. And then remember I said there was like a little dot there. I'm going to cover that one up right now. It's all good. Okay. So we have our base image done, right? So that kind of looks like my card, right? It's a little bit sized a little bit different, so it's 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 instead of a 3 by 3 inch square. And I didn't do a matte around it this time, but you definitely could have done a matte in a pink, or that yellow would make it pop up. But I liked it just without it this time. Now let's go on to that sentiment. So this stamp set, of course, comes with a sentiment, and that's the one I'm going to use today. So if I was going to put my card in here and stamp it on there, because this one is dark blue, it's just not going to pop or show up very well. You could definitely do, if you have or know how to do the embossing, you could definitely do the embossing with that one. It's like a white embossing powder. But I'm going to keep it fairly simple here. Let's come and back in with this one, and let's pick a coordinating colored cardstock. So I would say either that pink or a purple is going to go well with that. There's a yellow. Let's do the yellow. It'll go with our hair. Let's see if I have a small piece already cut. Would be even better. I don't, of course not. Oh, here we go. Maybe. There's a light blue. There's pink. We can do the pink. We could also go in with the like yellow polka dot would work too. I like the little polka dot one just because it's fairly subtle and you're not really going to see the polka dots on it. You know, I mean, you'll see it, but it's not going to take away from the actual sentiment. Let's line it up to the bottom part of this one. I haven't decided if I want to cut it bigger or smaller, so I'm going to line it up. This one is, so this side isn't cut and this side isn't cut. This side isn't cut. So lining it kind of up on there is going to help make sure that it's easier for me to cut my sentiment out. Keep that in mind. If you have to cut with your cutter, that if you're following and you're making it straight this way, it's going to save you time on the other end. I am not great at freestyle cutting. It's just not my thing. I'm going to do, we could bring in the VersaFine Onyx Black, but I think for this one, we're still going to just use that intense black ink. The dry time on it is a lot less than the other one, and we all know my patience level is fairly short. So it looks like it's stamped good. I stamped it twice just to make sure, but it didn't wiggle around, and I have enough paper left. If it did, I could have moved it, but or just switched out to the pink. So for this one, so there's a couple of different ways I can do this. So I'm just going to start by cutting it down to, let's see, I want a little bit of a border. So when I cut freestyle, because a lot of times I do die cut, I'm just going to go kind of keep it big enough that I can still work on it. Now, if your piece of paper is small, bring in a Post-it note. Let's see here. I've got a Post-it note somewhere. Bring in a Post-it note and stick your piece of paper onto the Post-it note, and then you can run it through. I mean, you're not using the Post-it, and this one's not going to work very good because it's an all sticky Post-it, but just a regular Post-it would work. This will help you hold on to your paper a little bit better if you're dealing, you know how this one is closer to the blade, and so I want to kind of keep it still in there. Oops. Yeah, this is what happens when we use the double-sided sticky. Okay. I'm going to line this one up on the inch. And this is kind of, it gets difficult when you're getting to that smaller level. Let me bend this over because obviously this is not going to work for me otherwise. Okay. Alright. Sticking with my double-sided or my extra full sticky Post-it note. Okay. So 1 inch and 1 inch. On this one, there's little grooved in lines, but I usually go, you know, start there and then I go from there. So holding that down, cutting it straight across. Now, I'm not going to cut the rest of it yet because I don't know exactly how I want to do it. So bringing my card base back in, you could definitely just center it this way and plop it on there. I kind of like it just like that, but you could definitely cut it equidistant on both sides, kind of leaving the same amount of upper and lower space, and then pop it on, kind of center it in your card, making sure that your sentiment is centered. But I think I like it this way, so I'm not even going to cut it. It's just easier to do this one on the back side. So I always use my glue, but you are more than welcome to use tape runner if that's what you have. Glue stick would work for this. So I'm just gonna, you know, I eyeball it. So let's see here. Oh, and I did bring my other mat. Now I feel bad. Okay. Don't worry, I didn't use the actual, you know, numbers on this mat either. I want to make sure that it's dry and not run my fingers all the way across it. But there we go. I have it mostly lined up and centered. And then I'm just going to bring in a straight scissors. You could do this on your, bring in your cutting blade again, your paper cutter if you don't want to use the scissors. But if you turn it over on the back side, it's easier to just cut it flush. And so then that would complete my card. Now if you have glitter, go ahead and add a little bit of glitter, maybe to, since I have it out, I'm going to use some Stardust Sickles. And I'm going to just add a little bit of glitter onto the heart on the teacup here, or on the tea bag. She's got glitter on her. Oh, because I have glitter all over my desk. I don't know why. We could do, I'm really just good with that kind of amount of glitter. I'm just going to do a couple of glitter dots down here to frame my sentiment. Bring that glitter down onto, I like to go with threes, so 1, 2, 3 is kind of where I'm going to be. You could definitely add glossy accents if you have glossy accents to her glasses and go that route. But there is my completed card today, keeping it simple and still using that same layout that we used last time, just changing my dimensions on my square a little bit, keeping that sentiment down on the bottom. I could have definitely flipped this one and done my sentiment on top and my image on the bottom. It would have worked out well as well. So I hope you enjoy this one. If you have questions, comments, please, you know, drop them down below. I will get back to you as soon as I can, and keep getting inky. Bye.